If you want to help Myth Vision Podcast grow, you can join our Patreon. There are different tiers, as well as help out with PayPal. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Dr. Price, I have an interesting question, and I hope I phrase this question well enough because it's something that even to this day, I still try to wrap my head around this question about crucifixion. When I, as a Christian, growing up, was told Jesus was crucified, died, rose again, I thought Romans grabbed him, put him on a wooden stake here on earth in real history. He died, and of course as a Christian I believed it literally, and he's buried in a rich man's cave, tomb, in one of the Gospels of course, and he rises from the dead. Now when I found out that there's the question that Jesus may not have existed at all, or there's a possibility that a historical Jesus may not have existed, I bumped into gentlemen like you, gentlemen like Dr. Carrier, and others who are very brilliant men who deny that there was an actual historical Jesus, or at least think it's unlikely. Not that you deny, but that you're not dogmatic. And so I want to phrase my question the best I can. When I think crucifixion, Occam's razor in my head says this was written approximately 1st, 2nd century. Romans were literally crucifying Jews on crosses. It was an apparatus that was literally being used to kill people that were insurrectionists and whatnot, and probably just crime, whatever. When I hear crucifixion, I think that. How does a mythicist explain crucifixion if there wasn't a guy on earth who was actually being crucified by the Romans in the 1st century, 2nd century, whatever, whenever, let's just say, let's go with the consensus, 1st century, 30s, approximately, these guys are being crucified. How is that if he wasn't an actual historical guy? Is it an image above in heaven while stuff's going on earth? Like there's a higher, when it talks about Paul saying, I do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but there are places where it seems like the enemies are these real Jews in the Gospels. It seems like a real situation. Paul sounds like he's fighting demons or gods, like other like spiritual creatures and beings. What's going on with the crucifixion of Paul's Jesus? We know the Gospels portray a, let's just use the term euhemerized, or a historical landscape describing an actual case where Romans are killing a Jesus and crucifying him on a wooden stake, it appears. Paul's, though, he leaves out all this information. He just says he died by crucifixion, or he was crucified, died, and rose again. How does a mythicist explain that? Can you go into a little detail for me?
Yeah, on the one hand, could just be a resolution to the story that was added to the story, and that originally Jesus simply ascended into heaven. Possibly the Transfiguration narrative was originally like that. And just as Philostratus says that many different stories are told about Apollonius's departure from earth, which implies nobody knew. I mean, even if there was an Apollonius of Tyana, it's interesting to me that crucifixion might have been considered appropriate, because I think it's pretty clear that one of the main inspirations for the gospel genre was the hero cult, stories about great semi-divine heroes and so forth. And these are reflected in some of the Greco-Roman novels of the 2nd century and beyond, where various characters the hero is condemned to the cross or actually crucified, but manages to escape through divine providence. And then he's been on this quest to find his wife or fiancée, girlfriend, whatever, who has been kidnapped by grave robbers, because she was thought to have been dead, and they broke into the tomb of a wealthy person and figured there are all kinds of rich things in there to steal. And she's waken up by coincidence as they come in, and they don't want to kill her, but they don't want a witness left behind, so they kidnap her and sell her as a slave. And she starts on this picaresque journey through the Mediterranean, and when her boyfriend finds out what's really happened, at first first he thinks she's been taken to heaven by the gods bodily. But then when he realizes what's happened, he embarks on a search for her, in the course of which he is crucified, etc., but escapes, and then has a joyous reunion with her, and each one thinks the other must be dead. How could you have survived these things all this time? And no, really alive. Very similar to various gospel scenes. Now that could have just been added to the story, because any way you look at it, the logic of the story is darkness before the dawn. The crucifixion is simply a way of saying, oh boy, things look really bad, but he's not down yet. He can't keep a good man down, and he rises, and so on. So it may simply be a fictive addition to the story.
Even in Paul?
Well, Paul, however, doesn't give any of that. Though I got to point out just one other thing. Plutarch tells the story of a what would you say, socialist or collectivist Spartan king, Cleomenes, I think it is, who is overthrown because he's engaging in a program of land redistribution, and they're not putting up with that. So they chase him out of Sparta, and he goes around the Mediterranean, winds up in Alexandria. He's fomenting communism, etc. there too, and so they kill him. And to make sure he's dead, they stab him in the side, kind of like in the Gospel of John, but then they crucify the body, which is what they used to do in the Old Testament when they crucified people. That didn't kill you, it just displayed the body as a warning to others. And these devout women who were big fans of this radical king came to mourn at the cross, and I think I've read two versions of this. A snake wound itself around the head of the crucified man, or ravens posted there to keep the other carrion birds away so they didn't start plucking his eyes out and stuff like that. And when the women saw this, they said, this guy must have been a son of the gods. I mean, it makes you wonder if this was really that unique. Okay, now what about Paul? He gives no historical information about it. There's nothing about Paul or Jewish elders or anything. I don't know, somebody's going to say, well, in 1 Timothy there is. Yeah, but this is an extremely late post-Pauline book that is getting this out of the Gospel of John, because it says Jesus made the good confession before Pontius Pilate. John is the only one where he does such a thing. So, but in the other epistles, nothing like that. In fact, you have stories that undermine the whole idea as it's portrayed in the Gospels. In 1 Peter and Romans, it says, now we know that the Roman government doesn't persecute the righteous. They just bear the sword to deal with criminals. Is it really possible that Christians who believe Jesus was put to death falsely by Romans would ever say such a thing? And that is really tough to explain. So Paul doesn't have that. Who does he say crucified Jesus? The archons of this age, the rulers, the fallen angels, servants of the demiurge and all that. They're very common in Neoplatonism, in Judaism, in Gnosticism, in Mithraism, and so forth. Principalities and powers, he says or whoever says in Colossians, by the cross he disarmed the principalities and the powers and nailed the Torah to the cross. As if it were the accusation against Jesus, like in the Gospels, King of the Jews and so forth. But it doesn't say that the archons and principalities and powers put these authorities on earth up to this scheme. I mean, it could mean that, but it doesn't say it, and that's kind of a big thing to leave out. Would that make any sense? Well, yeah, in the Rig Veda, one of the creation accounts says that Purusha, the primal man, sounds very much like Philo and the Jewish Kabbalah and Gnosticism. He sacrificed himself in the heavens to create all species of animals, the human race, the four castes, the scriptures, everything proceeded from his sacrificed body. So that, well, they're very much like Gnosticism. That wasn't a crucifixion, but it was a self-sacrifice in the heavens. Now, when you look at what is supposed to be present in heaven, as Johannes Weiss demonstrated, it's like as above, so below. Moses is shown the pattern of the tabernacle on Mount Sinai. It's in heaven. And he tells the workman, here's the way you build this according to the heavenly pattern. Then in Hebrews it says that Jesus returned there to offer his own blood in the heavenly tabernacle. In Revelation, we're told that there's a banqueting hall in heaven. There's a throne room in heaven, and so forth. There are angels swinging incense censers and all that. It's not like it's just the Platonic realm of forms or something. It's like a duplicate. They believe that in Qumran, they believe that as they were having their synagogue services, their hymns and stuff, the angels were doing the same thing upstairs. So it's by no means silly to suggest that there could have been a crucifixion in heaven, in one of the lower heavens where the principalities and powers and archons ruled. And one last thing, in Gnosticism, they had this theory about the creation of the world. The demiurge did it, but it was just a big mud heap with no life to it. So what did they do? They decided to capture the primal man, a Purusha analog, and dismember him and take the sparks of light of which he was composed and to use them as DNA, as we would say, into the husks and hulks of the inert humans so they came alive, and that's how Adam and Eve got there, and so on. And so you had the primal man set upon and murdered to give life to the world. I think that's what was historicized. Well, the Gnostics liked astrology, and as I believe Acharya said, that the cross was already a heavenly symbol because it, I think even Plato says that it represents, I can never keep the terms straight on this, but the celestial axis, the equinox that moved through the stars, and oh boy, what the heck is it? Some sort of horizon across the sky that they formed across. And it seems to me that's probably the one the Gnostics thought he was crucified on.
So that would be the one, to be technical, and that's what my question was going to be. Two things I have to add, because this is great. I love what you're saying. When you were talking about crucifixion, I kept seeing wooden stakes pop up in my head, you know? Like, just being honest, it gives an image, right? Because we're all trained to think that way. So my question was, what is crucifixion? And I guess with that, you've answered that could be what the heavenly crucifixion is, which would line up to, I suspect, I'm fascinated in trying to read what Dr. Carrier's new book's going to be, Jesus Christ, Outer Space, that kind of thing. Quite a title. But definitely interested in seeing the heavenly crucifixion kind of stuff. I guess we need it broken down more, because this is just, some of these terms are big to try and understand it, like the most simple terms. I was wanting to know, what does crucify even mean in Paul? Because it's obvious what it's showing visually in the Gospels, but in Paul it doesn't show you this. It doesn't go into any of the detail. That's why I asked, like, what did Paul mean he was crucified? And you've gave plenty of examples already in the video. Sacrifice, self-sacrifice, or even a selfless sacrifice where the daemons, the demons, the fallen angels, the gods, whatever you want to go with later church tradition and just say the fallen angels, or you could say, the daemons, the other gods, false gods that are up there, they capture him in the air and they crucify him not knowing he's the Son of God, which is Gnostic. What did it mean to be crucified? Is that like an apparatus in the heavens where it looks like he's being killed? And then number two, he was the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the world. So in the Apocalypse of John, something interesting is going on here. How was he crucified that long ago? Or is that just a statement of predestination? Because if it's just a statement of predestination, I'm reading too much into it. But if it's not, and he's saying, no, you don't understand. He was slain from the foundation of the world, which there are, by the way, hardcore Calvinists out there that I have bumped into, free grace Calvinists, that believe that Christ was crucified before the earth was created, according to their narrative, and that is why in history it becomes, if you will, or it takes its place. So technically all the chosen were always going to be justified, and it's like a hard determinism. I know that's a lot there, but what is Paul's crucified mean? And does it mean that they staked him on to something in the heavens, or do you think it's like a celestial astrology type thing going on in Paul's mind as to what the Christ is?
I would think so. And if you can have a banqueting hall and a throne room up in the sky, you can have a cross. And we have a pretty good theory as to what it was, this astrological phenomenon. And or there's the Southern Cross. I don't know if they could even see that, but yeah, I don't see any problem with that. And the idea is, with Occam's razor, isn't the simplest thing to say that, like thousands of other people, he was crucified on earth? Well, yeah, however, the water is muddied when he says it was the archons and the principalities and powers who crucified him. That's an odd way to put it, if you mean, he was like Spartacus or something. And so that gives rise to all this, and there are these myths of a salvific sacrifice in the heavens of the primal man. And I think the Calvinists are right. They're the only ones really, besides Mythicists, that point to this thing that he was crucified before the foundation of the world, but made manifest in our day. Well, what does that mean? That since what happens on earth is following and repeating what has happened in heaven, so that would certainly allow room for an actual crucifixion on earth. But it could just mean that this saving sacrifice once and for all in the remote past has been revealed to us now. And it seems to me, there you go, that that implies that they didn't think it had happened historically.
That's an interesting point that you bring up, because I got a buddy who said the Apocalypse of John appears like Jesus had not come to earth the first time. Like he doesn't seem to have an earthly Jesus that has visited yet. Almost like he's coming soon. Like Christians conflate and they harmonize and they make all this stuff the same. And they go, the Gospels mean what John means, what Paul means. But it appears to him, and do you share the same opinion, that the Apocalypse of John is seeing a coming Savior that has not come yet, that is on his way, so to speak, if you will, to redeem and to punish, if you will? He has not yet, though, it seems.
It can easily be read that way, with one exception. That in chapter 11 it says that Jerusalem is the place where our Lord was crucified.
Right.
But there's, independent of that, there's good reason to believe chapter 11 is a later addition to the book, because it starts out with this borrowing from Ezekiel. The angel gave me a little scroll and told me to eat it, and it would taste like honey in my mouth, but it would give me indigestion once I'd eaten it, and I did. And then here's what I saw on that scroll. That sounds an awful lot like the theory about Mark 13, the little apocalypse, as an apocalyptic pamphlet inserted into the book. And one of the reasons for this is that it mentions the beast already active, whereas he hasn't even been introduced yet. That comes up a couple of chapters later. So there's reason to think that that's not part of it, but that the rest of the book might even be the earliest New Testament book. There's some scholars have long suggested that. And I think, I cannot think of this guy's name, one of the English mythicists, and maybe it'll come to me later. So that could well be. There's all sorts of interesting theories about Revelation that you usually don't hear about.
I'm definitely interested in more on this topic.